Welcome to Within the Frame, where we bring the most pressing issues across the globe into focus. I'm Kim Mok-yeon. Tomorrow marks Korea's 81st Liberation Day, a day to honor those who fought for the country's independence and reflect on the freedom they helped secure. Now, and the occasion this year is all the more meaningful for Glen Winkel, the grandson of independence activist Shin Eul-no, who supported Korea's independence movement in Hawaii. Now, after discovering his Korean roots only a few years ago, Winkel came to Korea and was granted special naturalization last year. His case also helped lead to a bill proposed in June that would expand family recognition for descendants of independence patriots living overseas. Now, ahead of Liberation Day, we invite Mr. Winkel to the studio to hear his remarkable story of discovering his roots and finding a new home here in Korea. A very big welcome.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate that.
So let's start a discussion right away. So like I've said, tomorrow it's Liberation Day here in Korea. And I believe it's been a year since you have been naturalized.
That's correct, yes.
So I wonder, what does the day feel like for you? What does it mean for you?
Well, ironically, interesting, I knew about Independence Day, but it didn't really have that much meaning until realizing now that I'm a part of that history makes it so much more meaningful. And now to be a Korean citizen, actually celebrate independence, the 81st anniversary of independence, it's really special.
Right, it must be really heartwarming as well. So before we delve deeper into your story, let's first go back to the beginning. So how did you first find out that your grandfather, late Shin Eul-no, was an independence activist?
Well, actually, originally I was just applying for my visa, my F4 visa. My F4 visa could be issued based upon my grandfather's heritage. However, when I went to immigrations, they told me that without Korean documentation, I couldn't get a visa. And so I began doing the research, trying to figure out, how do I establish the heritage, his lineage? Because I had no birth certificate, no bonjok, no way to establish him as a Korean citizen because he left in 1903. And so I kept going to immigration and pushing the issue. They said, no, without documentation, we can't issue the visa. And so when I was at Gangwon Daehakyo as a student, I had applied for 2 semesters. I took a semester off, took the income, the money from the tuition, and I hired a visa attorney to help me with the visa. And she said, we can't get you an F4, we can get you an F5. And so we began working on the F5 visa. And when it came time to submit it to immigrations, I said, I really do want an F4. I want to establish my Korean heritage. It's very important to me. She said, well, it's not possible. And so I said, I kept pushing her, please. And basically, so she did. So it was ironic that I arrived on Valentine's Day of 2023, and exactly 1 year to the date, on February 14, 2024, I received an email from my attorney, and point number 1 was they're going to issue a visa without documentation. And then part 3 was this term I'd never heard before, 독립운동자. And I was like, what does that mean? And when you translate it, it comes up as meritorious individual or independence activist. I'm like, what is that? I didn't know what it meant.
Wow.
And so over the course of the next year, because people were telling me what it meant and I was studying about it, I came to understand that what he'd been doing in Hawaii was supporting the independence movement here in Korea. And no one knew that.
Wow, that's when you knew it, in 2024.
2024, yeah.
Wow. So it must have been really hard tracking down records going back to 120 years ago. Could you tell us, for our viewers, what was the process like?
Well, in the U.S., you can go to different genealogy websites, and you basically type in the name Shin, and you just start looking, and there's thousands of pages to go through. And I'd be up to 2 or 3 or 4 in the morning looking at documentation, and then trying to identify, okay, who's this person, who's this, oh, that's not the right Shin, and going through family records, birth records, marriage certificates, alien certificates, going to the census websites and looking at the censuses and trying to figure out who people were. And so no one had actually done the genealogy of my family and understood who my great-grandfather was, who my great-grandmother was, even the fact that there was my grandfather had a sister who passed away a year after they arrived in Hawaii. No one knew that story. So I was digging all little bits of the story about my grandfather, but the independent activist part never came up because I'm just looking at records as far as establishing where he was and who he was.
Wow.
Yeah, so.
Then was there any difficulty that you've faced, or you felt like, oh, I want to give up or something like that?
Well, the hardest part was that on the boat record when they came in Hawaii, the name used of my great-grandfather was not the name he was known by. Oh. And so I came up with basically 3 different names, and I had to figure out which was the actual name. And so when I finally discovered it was Shin Tae-young, I was able to search that name and then find more records that way. So wow. It was the efforts of Dr. Hyuk Lee, the historian in Hawaii, who actually had laid out all the individuals from Korea that had come to Hawaii and knew what boat they came on and when they arrived, and that was the key documentation for me.
Yeah. Wow, it sounds like it was quite a journey.
But it was amazing because, you see, most of us don't think about looking at our history and understanding our history, but when you do, you discover all kinds of things you didn't know. And it's always wise. We have thankfully have a recording from my grandmother, where she talked about these things. And I went over that recording hundreds of times, listening for little names and what does that mean, this name, and putting names together and assigning, oh, this was so-and-so's, and we figured out stuff no one knew in the family. So it was just by listening closely and paying attention, we learned about different historical events that occurred and who was whom and where they were and what happened. And it's really important to have that kind of a record.
Right, and it's really a good opportunity to better understand your backgrounds as well,
Absolutely.
right? So, but even so that you have discovered the details, your family history has been confirmed. We hear that your family was denied official recognition by.
Yeah, it was interesting. I mean, okay, so the important thing, my grandfather get recognized. That was the most important thing. And then when I applied for basically this, I guess it's only going to a status is what it was, and they said, well, we can't give you the card. And I was like, well, why not? Because my grandfather became a U.S. citizen and therefore was not a Korean citizen. Now, the irony was that the reason why he became a U.S. citizen was because he couldn't come back to Korea. Because you remember there were two factions in Hawaii, and one faction became into power with Syngman Lee. And so what happened was he denied those people from the other Korean Revolutionary Party access to from Hawaii to Korea. So he became a U.S. citizen in 1955, so he could actually visit Korea in 1960. So
Wow.
There's a story behind the story it's kind of sad that the very reason why he wanted to come to Korea was to get citizenship to come to Korea. Because he'd been an alien since 1903. He was always listed as an alien. And it wasn't until 1954, I think it was, there was the McCarran Act that was passed that allowed Korean Americans living in Hawaii to become U.S. citizens. And that would allow him access to go back to Korea and visit. So that's what he did.
But then what happened to actually get recognized?
Well, he got recognized because of me, basically. So, but I'm still in the Netherlands, There's a bill apparently out there right now that hopefully will pass that will allow me to be recognized. But it's not the most important thing. The most important thing is that he was recognized for what he had done because he worked so hard toward that goal.
Right, definitely. So, so like you said, your story, it's playing a big role to change the domestic law to better recognize other descendants from overseas as well. So if it really passes the Parliament, what would that actually mean for you?
I think as it is right now, most of the Koreans that I meet are so grateful to me because of my grandfather, and that's unusual because in Western society, it's basically the individual themselves, not their descendants. And so that in and of itself is enough. The fact that people shake my hand and, oh God, it makes me teary because they're thanking me and they're essentially thanking my grandfather through me. It's an amazing thing that happens here in the culture here. I'm just like blown away by it, literally, because he was the activist, not me, but I received the recognition because he's not here anymore. And that's the part that I love. So the card is not as important. It's just that it's just a more of a formality type thing to recognize people because I think normally I'm an unusual case that I came back as an overseas Korean, came here, became a citizen, and then when we discovered I was part of this heritage, not to get recognized is like, okay, well, it's okay. Because the people recognize that, and that's what's most important.
Right, it really opens the gate for more recognitions moving forward. But could you tell us any story that did you really meet someone who really thanked you for this situation?
Many people. Oh, many people. I ride my bike a lot, and I'll be on a bike ride, and somehow the story comes up. Or someone has seen Iu Jeep Charles, the story, and they'll be like, oh, thank you so much. And what's interesting is that, when people thank me, it's not just like, oh, thank you. It's like, you can tell it comes from the bottom of their hearts. They're so grateful. And for me, that's why Independence Day is so important because, here in Korea, people really appreciate Independence Day because it hasn't been a democracy for that long. And so it's very close to their hearts. It's just a generation ago, really. And so you feel this deep-seated gratitude towards myself and my grandfather, which I really appreciate.
Well, it's really heartwarming as well. But did you expect this to happen before?
When I came here, I knew nothing about this. I only knew that August 15th was Independence Day because we celebrated it in the U.S. But I didn't realize the significance and how that day would be so significant in my own life because when I arrived in Korea the first time to visit, I arrived on Independence Day. I didn't know that was the date. And then all that has happened on Independence Day since, it's just like, wow, how does this happen like that? So very exciting.
Right. So after all of this recognitions, you have decided yourself to become a Korean citizen last year. Tell us why Korea, and also what really pushed you or made you decide?
Well, I've been in the U.S. my whole life, literally. And, Korea was not a main focus of my life at all. And it wasn't until about, now it's 10 years ago, I started attending a Korean church. And it was an all-Korean church, which is kind of funny because there were other people that were not Koreans. And the reason why they were at a Korean church because their spouses were Korean. So the question they always asked me was, why do you go to Korean church? Is your spouse Korean? I said, I'm not married. And they went, then why do you come here? And it was because I loved the Korean church, I loved the people, and I felt a connection. And I don't know what that was, but there was a really strong connection. I thought like them, the pastor and I on the same wavelength. I loved the church, I loved the food, and it was clearly a part of me that was identifying with that Korean church. Wow. And then for a long time I was asking the question, well, why am I going to this church? It's all in, I don't speak Korean, but I did sing in the choir in Korean, so I was learning Korean that way. But for the longest time I was asking, well, why am I going to a Korean church? It's kind of odd. People would ask me, why do you go to Korean church? So over time, it dawned on me that it was part of my next step. The next step was to make that move to Korea. And so I started looking into that. And I remember it wasn't when my mom passed away in 2020, that was a big change for me because she was that connection to Korea, really. We were going to visit here. And so over the course of the next year, though, it was almost as if after she died, the wheels started turning, and within about a year and a half, it was very clear in my mind I was going to move to Korea. It was very strange how that all happened. I think there's something going on that I don't know about with my mom and someone else. But it's powerful because it was literally November 21st of 2021 when it was very clear to me, I'm supposed to sell my house, my car, and move to Korea. And so that was the goal. I had no plan. I'd never been there before. But I knew that was what I was being called to do.
Wow, strong determination.
Yeah, it was very strong.
Wow.
It was a huge leap of faith, it really was.
Of course, really.
Because I'd never been here before. I didn't know where I was going to move to in Korea. I didn't know very much about Korea. I knew a little of the history, besides my grandfather was Korean. So it was quite the journey. But looking back now, it's very clear after what's happened since I've been here that there was clearly, I'm in the right place at the right time.
Wow.
It's pretty amazing.
Then, so I'm guessing after that very determined decision, you also worked to find your relatives here in Korea.
Oh, yeah. Well, one of the hard things is that I remember when I came here to visit, I went to the Pyeongsan Shin office with my last name Shin, assuming I didn't know which Shin it was. And so we assumed because Pyeongsan Shin is the highest numbers, that might be the place to start. And we started looking at genealogy records, and they said, well, there's thousands of pages of stuff here. We'll get back to you. And so I was realizing this is not be an easy task. So I went to the police department, and I said, well, okay, my great-grandfather's brother, Shin Eul-no, he moved back to Korea in 1917, and he died here in 1943. Can we find his death record and then tie that to the genealogy records? And they asked me this really funny question, well, where did he live? I went, in 1943? I had no idea. So that was a dead end. So that was the start of realizing that this is not going to be an easy task to find them, even though there's good records. Going back in that time, there aren't good records. So what was funny was that because I did visit the Pyeongsan Shin office, the business office in Busan one time, and they asked me a question about how my great-grandfather got to the boat when he was living in Busan, and I didn't know. So I'm digging through records, and I found my grandfather's brother's passport information, and it showed the Chinese characters and showed that he wasn't Pyeongsan Shin, he was Yeol-san Shin. Oh. So I'm on the wrong family. So I shifted over now to a smaller subset of the family, and we're now working through that family, trying to locate the relatives on that side.
Wow, it's really interesting that you find like small evidences that really showed you your path. Then what happened when you met your relatives?
Well, I haven't met them yet. That's see, what we're going to do now is when I became a citizen, they asked me, do I want to keep my English name or my Korean name? And they recommend I keep the English name for now. So at this point in time, I want to change my name to my Shin name. But they asked me, well, where does the name fall in the genealogy records? And I said, I don't know. So the next goal is to find the family so I can identify where in the records my name actually should be, and then put the whole family inside the genealogical record so we know where they lie.
So were we able to identify them yet?
Not yet. No, that's a process. Yeah,
Uh-huh.
it's going to take some time, I think, because it's not going to be an easy task.
Of course.
But they're out there because here's the funny part. I know a common statement I kept hearing, he came from a large family in Busan. Mm-hmm. So a large family means there's a lot of descendants. And so his side of the family, I know it was his second wife, and Duk Hee Lee in Hawaii told me that his first wife had passed away. And so his second wife, he had basically my grandfather, the two sisters, and the young son. So it was only four children. And the youngest son was Gam-no, who came to Hawaii and then went back to Korea. And he was the youngest son from the previous wife and part of that large family. So if I can find his death certificate or something, that's the first link in the piece in the puzzle.
Well, we really hope you would be able to find them, and maybe also this broadcast could help.
I hope so, yeah. For anyone who's listening out there, yeah.
Right. Mm-hmm. Then going back to your life in the United States, we hear that you were a neuroscientist and
That's
also
correct.
a sports coach. Do you have plans to pursue this career here in Korea as well?
You know, I would love to. One of the reasons I chose Chuncheon, I'm living in Chuncheon, because they had a velodrome, which is a bank track for bike racing. Now, unbeknownst to me, when I got to Chuncheon, the velodrome was no longer there. But I love coaching cycling, and I coached the U.S. Air Force Academy for several years. And I love coaching. I coached at the Olympic Training Center, so a lot of Olympic and Paralympic athletes. And I love coaching the best athletes because I know enough about science and background and physiology and neuroscience on how to make a good athlete their best. And then in the cycling world here in Korea, cycling is not that good in terms of the world records. I mean, they're not the best. Japan's well represented, China's well represented, but Korea's not. And I thought, well, actually, maybe I could have a part in that because if I could. But the opportunity hasn't happened quite yet. My Korean has to be a lot better. My coaching skills, though, would apply very well because I've done it at the best level at the U.S., and so it's easy to do here by comparison.
Right. So is there anything that you're doing to prepare for your goal?
Not really. I'm trying to, for me, it's like I have to have a passion of what I do. I have to be really into what I'm doing. Otherwise, it's a lot of work. And it's not for the money. It's just really because I have great skills I want to apply, but I want to have the passion to drive me forward in that direction because that's what really makes things work for you. When you're passionate about something, it gets done well.
Right. So aside from this kind of area, like a sports coach area and a neuroscientist area, like, do you have any other possible things that you want to do here?
Many other projects. I'm working on one right now, which is interesting because a lot of times I see trends in the U.S. that are now taking hold here in Korea. And I also see, because I've seen what happened in the U.S. when these trends came along, what the downside was, or the bad side. And I see things happening here going like, no, don't do it that way. Because, so what I'm working on right now is really about, it's a worldwide problem, is obesity. And we've been studying for many, many, many years, and no one really gets it. And so I've been applying my understanding to it, and I think I have a handle on it now as far as how it benefits overall health as well as metabolic health. And so I'm working on developing a model to explain to people how to develop this model. I just got an email from a good friend of mine, and she asked the question, one of my daughters, she works in the yard all day long, she has her own farm, they want to lose weight. And because she doesn't know how to lose weight, I'm like going, it's really very simple. The question is, what are you telling your body? And it's only reading your instructions and doing what you tell it to do. And so you're giving instructions to gain weight. That's why it's gaining weight, and you can't lose weight.
I think it's easier said than done.
It is. It's very true. But you have to understand the body was designed to function in a certain way. If you understand what it's actually, if you understand like the rule book and you follow the rules, it makes sense. And it works every single time. I can go into great depth and I can give a whole seminar on it, but unless I go there. But that's why I'm really excited about that project. And I call it metabolic flexibility is the term I use.
Wow.
And so the average person is definitely not metabolically flexible. And so I'm working on that myself, developing a program where I can easily shift my metabolism from one side to the other, back and forth.
Wow, we'll definitely be looking forward to that next chapter of your career as well in the country. Now, finally, before we let you go, Mr. Winkel, is there a special message you would like to send to other descendants overseas, especially those who not even know their family history?
Yes, in fact, like I said, I didn't know my family history, and that's the key, is I didn't know my family history. So many times, I know there are many people in Hawaii, for example, that are descendants of 독립운동 that don't know that they'd be recognized here in Korea because they don't understand the history really of what really happened and what they actually did. Even my grandfather has his two daughters still alive, and they talked about it recently. They said, we didn't know, he just went to meetings and did this and that. We didn't realize that he was a hero in Korea. And they said, thanks to you, he is. So I think for many people, it's just understanding and learning about your own history, of your past. We tend to think, oh, we're just looking towards the future and not thinking, look back. But there's a lot of what happened in the past which is relevant to what's happening in the future. And so I think that being aware of your history is going to be very, very important to understand your own life as far as directing your own future. And that,
Right, it's a very powerful message, not only for people who really are descendants, but also for just other normal people who, who want to know about their past, and it could really help in, pursuing their future as well, right?
Definitely.
Right, definitely. Mr. Winkel, thank you so much for sharing your story with us tonight.
It's my pleasure, it really is. Thank you so much for having me.
And that'll be all from us on Within the Frame tonight. Be sure to tune in again next time as we continue to explore the stories that matter. Until then, stay informed and engaged.